This is a compilation of pictures and videos from a project I started back in 2014 when I bought a 1991 39 Sutphen. I bought the boat from Bob Martin in Cape Coral, Florida, and this is a picture of him running the boat in a poker run out in the Gulf of Mexico. These were Bob's engines that he built with Keith Eichert. These are 598 tall decks, and they made approximately 900 horsepower. This is about 2 weeks after I got the boat home, and about the only thing I had done to it was add that Sutphen 390 to the side, which was the way it originally looked when it came out of the factory. Here it is in its new home, and it does fit pretty good, but I did measure everything before I bought it, so I knew it would. Here's a few pictures of it under the lights, a little more close scrutiny. For anyone who doesn't know Sutphens, this is a 39 Raised Deck Sutphen. Those are number 5 Speedmasters, and it's got 4-blade 31 pitch cleavers. This is a heat exchanger for closed water cooling. Bob primarily ran this in the Gulf, so he set it up that way so the motors weren't constantly getting cooled with salt water. My first day out in the boat, docked up in Newburgh, New York. This was one of our favorite places to stop at. It's no longer there, they're out of business now, but this was at Gully's in Newburgh, New York, one of our favorite places. After my first day out, I realized I was going to need to do something about water pickup on this boat, because where we go boating, you can pick up a lot of silt from the bottom of the Hudson River, and it clogs the sea strainers. So this is a plumbing job I was working on to set the boat up so it had a shallow drive set that I could change a couple valves and pull water from real up high on the transom and not through the bottom water pickups on the boat. Worked real well on the Hudson. Very early on, I started cleaning up the interior of the boat. That front hatch that you see was broken. It just had a piece of canvas over the front of it instead of that particular plexiglass hatch. I duplicated the one on my 31, which was the same year hull, so it came out all factory. Screws went into the exact holes, and a couple more latch issues here on closets and things. Fixed those. I went through the boat, and the carpet was real ratty. The boat was in beautiful shape, but it needed some interior help. Carpet was real ratty, so I put new carpet through the whole boat, and that really cleaned things up a lot. Got things starting to look pretty good. In this picture, I'm warming up the engines. We're over in Old Saybrook, Connecticut, and getting ready to head across the Long Island Sound, do a run over through the Hamptons, and then back across over to Old Saybrook again. It's a run that we kind of do a lot of times with a bunch of Sutphens, cigarettes, Outer Limits guys. We usually do this around October, and Dan and Ken from Outer Limits put this together. This picture was taken over by Greenport running on the inside. This one's coming back across the Sound, heading back towards Connecticut. Okay, so in this picture you can see I have the hatch off and I'm getting ready to pull the motors out. I'm about to make some changes and take these motors from having a static compression ratio of 9.5 to 1 down to 8 to 1 because the way they were set up I had to doctor the fuel a little bit anytime I wanted to run the boat hard. So it was time to really build the motors that I wanted that were going to work right in this boat. Here's the motors out on the floor, getting ready to go up to my engine builder, Frank D'Amico. This will also be a project at some point, putting a new cockpit interior in the boat, as I'm really not all that happy with what I have here. Engine's loaded in the truck and ready to go to Cohoes, New York. So off I go to see my buddy Frank, where he'll tell me that pretty much let's get rid of everything you have. It's pretty much no good and we're going to start fresh with all new stuff. Heat exchangers up for sale. My 871 blowers, I sold those in about 15 minutes on eBay. Never sold anything so fast in my life. Okay, this was another little project in between selling off all the spare parts that I wasn't going to use. When the motors are out of the boat, that is definitely the time to take all your hoses that run under the engines for cooling and pretty much anything that you can't get to while the motor's in the boat. This is the perfect time to go through and freshen everything up. Last thing you want to do is have to change one of those when the engine's in the boat, because basically if you do, you pretty much have to pull one of the motors out to be able to do anything underneath there. In this picture, just to the left of the drive assembly, you can see my pickup that branches off into a T and goes to my C strainers, and that's my shallow drive pickup for when I'm running shallow water. More pictures of parts that I'm selling off. I did keep my crankshafts, my intake manifolds, my intercoolers, my valve covers, my flame arresters, and pretty much everything else related to the old engines. I put pretty much everything up for sale. Here's a picture of bow tie blocks or tall deck blocks. I sold off the oil pans. They were Keith Eichert set of oil pans with an integrated external oil pump, but not a dry sump setup. That went with the blocks. There's going to be pictures here of the heads that I sold. Nice set of aluminum Canfield heads. They were nice heads, but they just weren't going to flow enough to build the power that I wanted. We ended up putting a set of AFR 357s on, and so little by little, I got rid of all these parts. Was able to sell them pretty quickly. I no sooner put them up on the shelf to store them, and they were pretty much going down the road quicker than I could have believed, thanks to eBay. Here are those Keith Eichert pan and pump setups. They were pretty neat, but I really didn't want to have the belt drive external pump. Carrillo H-beams going down the road. These were replaced with Oliver rods, so that was a step up. As I stated earlier, I was putting a lot of things up on the shelf and storing things away, thinking it was going to be a long time before I was able to sell off this stuff. And much to my surprise, I no sooner put this stuff on eBay, and I was getting calls left and right, and within just a few days, I was palleting things up and packaging things, and loading things on tractor trailers with my forklift, and away it went. So I was able to recoup some money for the project. Not a ton, but every little bit helps. Well, unfortunately, I absolutely loved driving this boat, but it was time to stick it in the corner and then put the cat where it was more accessible to get out, because this thing was stuck here for a little while. This project was going to take a bit, so I had it in the corner for about a year and a half. And here's the cat right next to it. That's ready to go. Since the other one had no motors, it was time to start using the cat. A little non-boating boating day. Me and a bunch of my buddies, my son, and then a friend of mine's son down at the New York City Boat Show. We're too cold to go boating. We might as well just go boating on somebody else's boat that we don't own. So it's another good day had by a bunch of guys. 4 of the guys in the pictures here are Sutphen owners. Pretty good day. Polishing up my intercoolers here. Frank told me, you're in the cleaning business, so you take them home and clean them. So basically, that's what I was doing. They were looking a little tarnished, and I got them to pretty much look like new. He didn't want something ugly going on top of all the brand new looking stuff. So they came out pretty good. Rebuilt the sea pumps, and also luckily I was able to get from Hard Marine new intake manifolds for the sea pumps, as they were pretty corroded and actually starting to leak a little bit. So I was able to get those freshened up and pretty much as good as new. These are my new 8.3 liter Whipples, still in the box. Beautiful day. Well, I was up visiting Frank, and he's definitely making some progress. Where we are right now, these are a pair of Dart tall decks. We're going 4.5 bore, 4.5 strokes, so that's going to make them 572s. The intake manifolds are on, the intercoolers are on, the 8.3s on top. You can see we got Jessel valve train. There's competition cam in there. We've got Jessel belt drive on the front, and a lot of goodies. It's looking pretty good. Now here we can see we got 4 1050 quick fuels on top. He's got the most of the linkage set up, except there was one problem. The way the linkage pulls on this setup, it pulls from between the carburetors, not in front. So one of the problems we had was we were not able to find, either of us, an extension linkage where my throttle cable was able to hook up onto this. So there'll be some pictures a little bit later where I had to go ahead and manufacture a bracket that would hold my throttle cable and set it up so I could hook my linkage up to this setup. But things are coming along real nice here. Now these engines, when Frank was all done, they dynoed at 10 pounds of boost. They made a little over 1,200 horsepower, and we're running them around 8 pounds of boost, and they're making about 1,150 horsepower with also about 1,150 foot-pounds of torque. Okay, this is one of the rare times you see some of Frank in a photo. Kind of reminds me of Wilson in Home Improvement. This happens to be an extremely handy tool by Kool Tools, Kool Tools. This is a push lock vise that helps you do push lock hose fittings and seat the hose all the way up to the stop. And when you make a push lock hose with one of these, you get it exactly perfect, just the way you want. It's just a fantastic tool. Another tool we're going to see here that I used in rigging a lot of the stuff. This is for my water lines. These are for the screw together ends. You can put the end of the hose in a vise and you don't mess up all the anodized ends. And then the other thing that probably everybody's seen is a set of these wrenches, which you also use for the anodized ends, and you're able to put the tighten up the hoses and loosen them back up without marring everything up. These make a big difference when you're doing rigging. I had my transmissions and my drives all gone through. The trannies were completely rebuilt and the drives were all gone through and new prop shafts put in on my drives. So that was all done by Pete Knopper at Knopper Marine up in New England. This is a picture of the race mount for the front of the engines, and the picture that you see here is the Holley fuel pump was so big that I couldn't mount it on there where my other pump was because there's a lip on that race mount, so I had to make an aluminum bracket to stagger it up off the mount, and that's what you're looking at there. Okay, well, I'm back up at Frank's and he's pretty much done, but at this point we had to mount my drive guardians and put the transmissions on, and then I spent the rest of the day making all new oil lines with that Kool Tool push lock press, and got started on some of the water hoses, but most of that I finished back in my shop. But everything here is, pretty much done and ready to go. There's a picture of me standing next to the engine, give you an idea how big they are. They are standing on a dolly, but they are pretty monstrous engines. They're definitely tall. This is inside the boat. I had a little bit of wiring I had to play with. There were a couple, it's a little messy. That's the way the boat came, but there were a couple things that didn't work, and I had to straighten those all out. Now, next picture, you'll see I've got the motors loaded up, and I'm ready to head back from Cohoes, New York, back to Pomona, New York, where I'm gonna drop them off in the garage and finish rigging them and getting them ready to go into the boat. So there, the Eagle has landed. They're back in my garage. And the next picture we'll see, here's the engines on the floor, getting ready to have some more electrical work and a little bit more plumbing done, basically more rigging, so I have them ready to go. There's another thing that I wanted to do on this. This didn't have just plug and play harnesses. It does have a Mercury big plug, but then it had a lot of individual wires on a bank, and none of them had shrink wrap on them. So one of the pictures you'll see, I have everything shrink wrapped, and just a lot of little details, a lot of hours getting this ready, putting harnesses together and hoses together and mounting things, and basically I spent about a week and a half getting these two engines all finished, buttoned up, and ready to the point where we could then go ahead and install them in the boat. Okay, what you're looking at here on the back of that oil filter housing, there's a T there, and then I have a Honeywell switch, and that's an oil pressure switch. If my oil pressure ever drops below 15 pounds, that'll automatically shut the engine down. I also have a high temperature shutdown built into this, and that shuts the engines down at 170 degrees. All of this works through relays, so I've got three things that can shut things down: my tether, my a high temperature, or a low oil pressure setup. And another thing I did was On the dash, I have a switch where I can override the oil pressure shutdown. This way, when I'm docking and I'm making shifts, if the oil pressure does drop low, below 15 pounds when you're shifting gears, you won't stall the engine. So it's kind of the best of both worlds. Okay, this boat through its lifetime has had a few different exhaust systems, and I'm doing a complete brand new exhaust system, new headers, new pipes, all from Harden Marine, and I'm setting it up so I'm definitely not going to have to open holes any bigger than I had before. If you look at that center cover plate, you'll notice the pipes, one pipe on the port motor is higher than the pipe on the starboard motor, and I'm going to equal all this stuff out. It's going to be completely uniform and a beautiful looking exhaust system. I'm also going to get rid of these black trim plates because I really didn't like that. I'm going to switch to a white plexiglass cover plate, and it'll be the same contrast, that the difference between the gel coat of the boat and the windscreen. That's a picture of the windscreen there against the boat. So that's basically the color of the cover plates that I'll have on my exhaust when I'm all done. Here the engines are all dressed and ready to go. As I stated earlier, the only thing that was still a problem was I had to make one more piece of hardware so that when I put the engines in, I'd be able to connect my throttle cable to the linkage that comes off of the carburetors. And it just was something that Frank and I absolutely could not find. We both spent a lot of time looking for it, and it just wasn't available. So anyway, the engines are pretty much all ready to go except for that, and that's going to be my next little project before I go ahead and install them. Well, boat's out of the garage, and it's time to get about 1.5 years worth of dust off it. It definitely need it. So by the time I get it back in the garage, it should be looking pretty good again. But you'll see a couple pictures. I got one of the across. There you go, across the deck. The boat's got a beautiful shine. This was a great find. This boat. It's absolutely in phenomenal shape. And here we are. We're back in the garage and ready for the next phase of the game. As soon as I get a little bit more time, the next thing I'm going to do is drop one of the motors in and then get to work on that piece of throttle linkage. Okay, well, I didn't take any pictures of putting this engine in. I'll get pictures of putting the second one in, but one engine's in, and it still has to be hooked up, but I do have the one in, and then I'm about to get started on my throttle linkage issue. Back in the garage till the next day. I can steal a little bit of time and get back on the project as usual. Always a work in progress. Okay, this one is now hooked up. Okay, so I'm cutting up some aluminum the same thickness as the linkage plate that sits alongside of the blower. It's going to go underneath that linkage plate and go back about 6 inches, and then it's going to have about a 2-inch by 1-inch raised portion that I have to weld on, to drill that and tap it so my throttle cable clasp can mount to that. And then also at the same time there'll be 2 holes in it so that up forward it can mount underneath that throttle linkage plate. Okay, here we are installing the second motor. At least we got some pictures of this one, since I forgot pictures of the first one. And my son's down in the hole putting engine mount bolts in. I'm in and out on the ladder, on the forklift, little by little. You squeeze it in there. It's a tight fit, but it goes. The first motor goes in with both headers on. The second motor goes in with the port motor goes in with the port side header off, and then you put that on after the motor's in. A little bit of a tight squeeze, but there they are. Both motors are in. Can't really tell if they're both hooked up or not yet in that picture, but very shortly we will see the picture. I think the next picture here, both motors are completely hooked up at that point, and the only thing we're missing is it's ready to go. It just doesn't have, I don't have tailpipes for it yet. So that's going to be the next project that we're getting to. Is I had some flanges sent to me from Hardin Marine that I then build PVC mock-up exhaust pipes off of, and the only problem is, unfortunately, they sent me the wrong flanges. They sent me flanges for smaller pipes, not for the size pipes that I had, or not for the size headers that I had. So I had to get a little creative, and I had to go to Home Depot. Besides buying a bunch of PVC, I bought some toilet bowl flanges and modified those a little bit and built my mock-up tailpipes completely from PVC junk from Home Depot and toilet bowl flanges. And when all was said and done, it came out pretty good. There's what the first mock-up pipe with the toilet bowl flange, and in the next picture you're actually going to get to see the toilet bowl flange. Here's the toilet bowl flange. That they said they've seen people do it this way. Hardin Marine told me they've seen people do it this way, and it worked out pretty good. And then in the next picture you'll see one of the pipe number one coming out of the back of the boat, and then, you know, little by little was regression. 2 pipes, 3 pipes, 4 pipes, and put a straight edge across the back. When I was pretty much all done, I had to shave the 2 center pipes just a little bit to make them perfect, because, you know, you pretty much, what you send out to Hardin Marine is what you're going to get back. So if you send something out wrong, what you're going to get back is going to be wrong. But they're pretty good. They made an absolutely beautiful set of pipes, and I'm real happy with it. And when all was said and done and the trim pieces were on, I had another buddy of mine, Morgan, who has a 34-foot Sutphen old Harris Casino race boat. One of the guys who works for him, Richie Budd, he made those trim pieces for me on the back of the boat, and they came out beautiful. So little by little, between the exhaust, the trim rings, everything ended up buttoning up real nice, and it came out real beautiful when all was said and done. Okay, now this picture is, my son has me closed down inside the engine compartment with the hatch all the way down, and I'm looking up inside to see if I'm going to have clearance with the intake. There's my fuel pressure regulator, just barely making it, and basically looking for clearance on everything to make sure everything is going to work out. And the intake was fine, but the problem that I ran into when I was under there checking everything out, there was like 1.5 inches of almost 2 inches of extra space above the flame arrestor, so that wasn't a problem. Next picture, there's a look at the exhaust, how close it is to the interior, to that hatch, and you can see where it was modified once before for a different exhaust. And this side's close, but it's really not going to work. The next picture, which is the other side, it's nowhere near going to work. You can see that bung coming out of the top of the header, which is for a loop hose that then goes to the tailpipe, that's just going to hit that interior. So the next thing I decided after being in there and seeing this was, it's time to take the whole interior apart while I'm waiting for my pipes to be made and have a whole brand new interior made. If I'm going to do it, now's the time to do it. So that's what I did. On to the next project. It's only money. These flame arresters actually turned out to be too small. They're only 2-inch rise. And after running the boat a little bit, I was starting to realize anytime I ran the boat wide open throttle for any period of time, the plugs would actually start to get rich on me, and I just really was starving the engine for air. So one of the last things that I've done recently was buy a new set of hard marine flame arresters that are 3-inch instead of 2-inch, and that's basically 50% more air. And there was still plenty of room to go up another inch in the hatch, so that was just another project. Okay, the hatch is off, but I haven't sent the interior out yet. But this picture was just to give you an idea. Look at how big those engines are. Look at how far they stick up out of the top of the boat. This thing's got a lot of engine in it. Looks pretty cool. Well, my pipes are back. They came out beautiful. Now, of course, I'm waiting on my interior, which ended up being a little bit, but little by little, it's getting there. But gotta say, I'm very, very happy with what Hard Marine did for me. They did an outstanding job. Okay, my interior's back. Rick from Richards Upholstery up in Upper Greenwood Lake, New York. This guy does unbelievable work. It just came out fantastic. I can't say enough. I wanted the boat to look period correct, and in the next picture you'll see my 31 Sutphen off there on the side, and you can see the way the stripes and the interior are in that. So I copied that look because that's an original 1991 interior in that boat. So I wanted this one I wanted to have the colors of this boat, but I wanted the look to be period correct. So Rich just, he hit it out of the park. This job, he always does beautiful work. He did that little that little blue laser next to that too. He did an amazing job in that boat. So there's just another picture of the interior. Another thing, those controls, those Keith Eichert controls, that's the only set of Keith Eichert controls probably in the world that have detents in them, so I can put those throttles where I want them and they stay in place. That's something that I fabricated myself, because those race controls, when you let go of the throttle, they always spring back, and that's not the greatest for a pleasure boat. Okay, I figured we should have a little before and after picture, a contrast picture of the engine compartment. That's where it started. That's what it looked like when I bought it, and this is what it looks like now. Big improvement, if you ask me. This was after some run time. I wanted to check the spark plugs, see how things were burning, and after just going through and making sure everything was running properly, one of the next things was just go back also through and check the valve lash on everything, make sure nothing's out of whack. When everything's brand new, after you run it a little bit, things settle, things need to be readjusted. So it's a big investment with everything that was done here. You want to make sure you keep everything the way it's supposed to be. Maintenance is always key, keeps things going. These are my new flame arresters. I haven't even run the boat with these yet. These probably should be the very last pictures in this sequence, but anyway, I put them in here at this point, but they are brand new, and I'm hoping they're going to give me a little bit more air, and hoping I'll get a little bit more speed out of it when I'm done as a result. With the other ones, I seem to be starving. The best I ever had out of the boat was about 105 miles an hour, and I'm really pretty convinced it's got more with a little bit more dialing. This is one of the coolest boats I've ever been on in my life. This is a 40-foot Sutphen known as TKO, winner of many world and national championships in classes P1, P2, and P3. My buddy John Godfrey owned that for a number of years. Here's a picture of him running in the Hudson River run, somewhere between Newburgh and Kingston. Not exactly sure where that was, but it's a pretty awesome boat. These next few pictures were taken up in Kingston at Old Savannah Restaurant. This is we had 4 Sutphens together that day and a 36 Spectre. This one you're looking at right here is Walter Collins's small TKO boat. He was the owner of the other TKO too. He was the one of the drivers who won all those classes. This is a 31 that's set up. It's a pleasure boat, but a real fast boat, about a 100-mile-an-hour boat. That's Jim Wicks's 34 Raised Deck. Morgan's 34. Morgan's 34 is a staggered. It's the old Harrah's Casino race boat. And then my boat and my buddy Gregory's boat, the Cat, and my 39 are way off in the distance up ahead. Good bunch of Sutphens. It was a nice run that day. This is a very cool 39. As you can tell by the 4 pickups in the gas tank and the 4 oil tanks, that this particular boat is rigged with 4 outboards, 4 250 horse Mercuries, 250 XS's. There's a picture of it sitting at the dock with the 4 motors. And the owner of this boat, his name is Bob McCoy. This guy had 2 39s. This one, a 39 like mine, a 34 raised deck, and he also had a 31 with 2 300X outboards on it. I think I believe that's Bob right there. I never met him, but I'm pretty sure that's him. His 39 like mine was called the Real McCoy. And as far as anybody who knows Sutphens, pretty much everybody said that Bob was the Real McCoy. This is another cool 39. This was a rare Mercury package for a number of years. These are Mercury engines, but they're Ferrari engines. They're two 12-cylinder naturally aspirated Ferrari engines in a 39 Sutphen. Very similar to mine, but it's a black boat with red interior. Very cool boat. Now, this is just a collection of a bunch of brochures and stuff these are actually all the way back from the day I brought these brochures home with me, the day I brought my 31 home, because I bought my 31 brand new back in 1991. And it's funny, on my way driving home, I'm reading the brochures. I haven't even gotten my boat home yet and haven't even got a chance to rig it and take it for my first ride. And I'm dreaming about someday getting a 39. And I always had, it was always a dream, and I always kept my eyes open. And when Bob Martin decided to put his up for sale, I just did what I had to do to make sure I ended up with it. But so there's a few brochures of pretty much the lineup back then: 39, 34, the 31, and on down to the 26 Rum Runner. Well, that's it. My project, a little bit of Sutphen history. Hope you liked it, and thanks for watching.